one of a very disciplined second audience here. Like usually there's much more coffee and conversation going on. So thanks for your snapping to it. I really appreciate that. I'm John Foster. I head up the group at Wolf & Associates, a consulting firm that specializes in organic, pretty much everything in the organic space. And I'm very happy to welcome a couple friends, longstanding colleagues, both of them, for a discussion around really how to harness the power of your relationship with the certifier. And some of this comes out, right? Am I in the right session? Yes.
Yeah, you are. You're
yes.
just John McKeon for today.
Yes. John McKeon. I could do worse than be confused for John McKeon, actually. But that's hilarious, actually. So it's really funny. I'll take a little detour. John McKeon was the first person I hired when I could hire people at Earthbound Farm. This was in 2007. And we happened to have the same first and middle name. And I'm quite a bit grayer than John, but we often got confused for each other in emails at Earthbound Farm with people who knew us both. So we would often get the wrong email for each other. And fortunately, there was nothing too untoward in those emails. So all the more humorous to have John McKeon. We're still getting confused, actually. He's in the back there. I just said before you came in, John, I could do a lot worse in who I was confused with. So thanks for that detour. I appreciate that. So back to the panel, it's how to harness the power of a positive relationship with your certifier. And one of the themes that has come out of this session, this event in past years, but also other events in the organic space, are how easy it is to have a contentious or troublesome relationship with the certifier for many reasons. But my experience, I started out in the organic space as an inspector. This was about 30 years ago, and did 12 years and, 1,000-something inspections for many different certification agencies. And I found, then I did reviews and a lot of other things, but one consistency I found was that the better relationship an operator, whether it's a farmer or processor, something in between, the better relationship that an operator has with their certifier, the fewer problems they have. There's lots of reasons for that. But the trend is, if you put a little investment in understanding what the other party needs, this is true for life, not just your certifier, but particularly partners, if you put a little effort, a little investment in understanding what they're trying to get to, not just what they're asking, that relationship can really improve for everyone. And like any kind of preventative maintenance, good communication with the certifier improves everyone's experience, just like relationships, just like partnerships. So I wanted to explore that a little bit more, and particularly on the heels of full implementation of strengthening organic enforcement, that brought on a lot of tension between operators and certifiers for good and not so good reasons. So this is actually a derivative of SOE without being explicitly called out that way. Because through our consulting work particularly, we act as an intermediary between operators and certifiers frequently. And we work with many certifiers, many operators. And again, the one key consistency was that if the operator initiates that positive investment in time and understanding, without exception, the certifiers respond to that. So I'll give a little context, then introduce these two. I want certifiers in a really interesting position. They occupy the central spot in this public-private partnership between federal regulation and certification at the operator level. And certifiers operate this middle ground. It's a really tough position to be in because they're limited by everything the federal government is limited by. And yet they have to be the face of regulation at a very practical, pragmatic level. But they have to operate and be consistent with all this theory of law and regulation. They have very little leeway. I would argue that most certifiers do an outstanding job of navigating that space. It's a really tough position to be in. I've been in that as a certification operator myself in the past, and I've chosen not to stay in that role for a reason. It's a really difficult spot. So we have Aaron Turner, who is at Organic Certifiers, I guess it's virtual, more company now. Used to be based in Ventura, California. We have Amanda Felder, who I also had the privilege of working with at Earthbound Farm many years ago, and actually does a lot of the same things at a much higher level than that I did when I started there. For Taylor Farms officially under the Earthbound brand. So I'm going to ask a couple of introductory questions, and around this point of what makes a positive relationship with certifier and how that impacts compliance and how that impacts the work it takes to stay compliant. Amanda, if I could start with you, if you could describe the role you have briefly. And then mostly focusing on what dynamics with certifiers you experience. Just no names unless you're comfortable doing so. But more about the dynamics, more about the relationship and the impact that has on the work you have to do.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to not take over this entire panel. Apologies in advance.
I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to cut you off in 3 minutes.
Good. So at Taylor Farms, I oversee all of our organic certification across all of our operations. So we have farming, we have facilities, we have a distributor, broker, a farm stand, organic cafe. I feel like I'm forgetting something, salad dressings, I don't know, lots of things. And we actually switched certifiers during SOE because of our relationship and their ability to meet our needs as a fresh produce company. When I first started in organics, I didn't know anything. I didn't have formal training. And my certifier at the time, bless my account specialist, I asked a lot of dumb questions. And it was, how do I get this better for you? So I'm not understanding this noncompliance. I'm not understanding this form. Is there a better way I could get this to you faster that's cleaner so that we're not going back and forth 20 times? And so she unintentionally trained me to be a better paperwork person, which then I took on to other certifiers and other practices and just building out our programs at Taylor to say, again, with other certifiers when we worked with, let's say, Certifier B, of, okay, this is how I did it at Certifier A, how does that work with your process? Or, you know, what can I do to make this quicker for you? We have 6 operations and I'm filling out 6 different forms for the same thing. Can we make this easier for you? Because this is extra work for me for no reason. So it's just having those conversations and not being afraid to ask a question while they're enforcing some sort the standard. They're not necessarily a bad police officer. Like, I also don't do anything bad for starters, but I mean, we have a transparent system that we're not doing anything wrong. It's great to ask for permission. Forgiveness is not always a good thing. And so, asking ahead of time and building that out goes a long way. So I think I just always started having a relationship and just building it, and then that just carried forward through everything.
Wow. Nicely done at 3 minutes sharp. Well done. Thank you for that. Aaron, I know you're organic certifiers now. I know we met, 20 many years ago at another certifier. So I want to call on your certification experience, not just organic certifiers, is how have you viewed relationship building with clients from the certifier's perspective?
I think it's the critical link to success for anyone to communicate really well, to build a relationship with your certifier, understand how they receive communication best, be it on the phone, be it on email, understanding the people that you work with and what the requirements are. That's really the basis of it. And maintaining those documents. The OSP, the Organic System Plan, is a living document. And so if your practices change, updating that and maintaining that they're accurate on file with your certifier.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just recently heard something, I think it was on Instagram, from Tom Hanks talking about what works to be a good actor. And this came, a hard lesson learned at the time for him many years ago. But the rules I thought were really applicable, which is be on time, know your lines, and understand kind of what's going on set. And as you were talking, Aaron, those things all resonated with me with respect to expectations of certifiers. Just like a director on a movie set, certifiers have to get certain things done in a certain amount of timeline. So to what extent are those three things essential in managing your relationship with the certifier? Be on time, get things in when they have to be, know what you're saying, know your lines, and have an understanding about the context you're operating in. Is that an apt description, or is there more?
I think it's a very good description. Operators need to understand the regulations, and if they don't, to ask questions. Communicate with your certification personnel so you can understand what the needs are. I would communicate early instead of later. It takes a minute to get back, so it's important to come in early when you can and give time for that information to be processed. Time, knowledge, and the third point?
Oh, yeah, know your own role.
Know your own role.
Know your lines.
You're responsible for your
yeah.
certification. It's the certifier's job to verify that you're doing things correctly. And it's a partnership. And so the better relationship you have, probably the better outcome that you'll have.
Good. I'm going to ask Amanda if you've got. I happen to know some of the challenges that you have dealt with. I'm not going to talk about them, but we'll ask in generic terms. Can you think of a particularly challenging situation with one of your growers or co-packers? Doesn't matter so much, but can you give kind of an example, a generic example of a really difficult situation and how you approach that with the certifier as hopefully as a model, something that we can talk about and kind of dissect a little bit.
Yeah, I'll start with an easy one. I have a lot. So we're currently certified with CCF. We'll say Certifier B was our certifier a few years ago, and they're not as farmer focused. They're more processing focused. So for a facility, that sounds like it makes sense, but we're a produce facility, so we work on, short timelines, and we kept getting a noncompliance for not having the office that would review the inspector's report didn't understand how we make spring mix. How are you mixing it? And so I had to explain. And so as soon as the report came in, I called my certifier and said, okay, let's talk through this. What exactly is it that you need to know? Because we're not mixing like cake batter. This isn't like a process where I'm dumping this in and then we mix it for a while. It's literally it's on a line. Sometimes it's grown in the field, already blended and harvested. I don't know what part you're not connecting with this. And so I explained to them, they explained to me why they were confused, because they're an office person. They don't go in the field. They're not an inspector. They don't understand produce. And so I have a 3-page document that I love that I took pictures of in the field. This is what spring mix looks like. Here's a row with red and green, and we harvest it, and this is what it looks like in the bin. And then here's an alternative when we're in the plant, and we're putting a couple of bins on a line, and it gets mixed in the wash line. And so explaining that with photos, or how can I teach you without bringing you here so that we don't keep having this concern, On a more complicated level, import-export certificates and timeframes where I'm fresh produce, I have a 2-hour window to get something across the border. And my certifier said, if you get it to me at 8 a.m., maybe I can get it to you at 5 with a rush fee. And that just doesn't work for us. And, when SOE hit, I was like, because that was going when LPO for the Mexican standard was enforced. And so I had already had to deal with this scenario. So when SOE hit, I was like, hey, how are we going to approach this? And they're like, we don't know, but I guess we'll kind of figure it out. And does anyone else do fresh produce? They're like, well, we have lemons. So lemons isn't leafy greens. Lemons can sit there for a day at the border and nothing bad happens. I don't have that option. So how can we figure out, and again, the information. I have 100 trucks crossing. I have a 2-hour window. This is what my needs are. How do we get to this point? And if you can't meet me there, then I'm going to need to find somebody who can, because my business can't function that way. But if I didn't know that and I just said, well, get it to me, that doesn't help, where at least as a certifier, okay, I need a full person to handle this workload, or is there a way that we can navigate it to make it more efficient, or what's that income stream look like to hire someone? But without that, then I'm just yelling for no reason.
Great example. So kind of bouncing off of that, Aaron, you've sat in many chairs as in the certification side of things. If you could come up with an example, either a real positive example where you had that experience, positive communication with a grower, or a real negative example or unproductive example where you could identify what would really help and how you're able to transform that situation into something productive.
Materials. Farmers use materials, and sometimes there's emergencies. And as you mentioned, staff are not always knowledgeable of exactly how a farmer operates on a specific farm in their specific way, and what things are extremely timely. Like, you need to get a material on, or you might lose an entire crop, and there needs to be urgency with that. So I've heard that from growers, and that communication and developing of policies to help support growers, especially when it's an already approved material that's Armory approved or something like that. Building in systems and understanding within our staff to help them understand the importance of this and the impact of not acting quickly. So there is education necessary, and every operator is a little bit different, and so I've been able to work with teams to implement grower sound policies to help support growers. That's where I was headed next. Like, what work does it take to do that? To do that, buy-in. Part of it is, so as you mentioned, John, certifiers are accredited. So we're basically certified by the USDA to do our job. So we're expected to do our job in a certain way, and we're asked to make sure all those boxes are checked, and we have systems in place to verify all of the things. And so bringing the sound and sensible, coming back to that, and bringing reality into the mix and educating staff as well as educating the farmers on the importance of timing and understanding of this situation. So what that takes is education, talking to the growers, understanding where they're coming from, and then bringing that into the certifier to help build sound decisions and policies to help support them. Because in the end, we all want organic to succeed. That's why we do this work. That's our passion, right? Certifiers are not out to get you. It might seem like that sometimes, but we're trying to ensure all the pieces of the puzzle are in place so that the consumer who's buying that product is getting what they think they should be getting. Mm-hmm. Did that cover it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So one of the themes from the previous session was that I pulled out from the panelists was the need for consistency and consistent application of the regulation, consistent interpretation of the regulation, and I want to call out an inherent tension in the fabric of the organic community here. So those of you a little longer in the tooth will remember a time that pre-NOP and doing certification before there was a national organic program. In some cases, before there was an Organic Foods Production Act of 1990. There was organic, it was just not the same flavor that we have now. At the time, one of the founding tenets of that organic movement, would be an apt description for it, was variability based on your specific site locations and a lot of allowance for variability based on whether your farm was in Southern California or Maine or Florida or Argentina or Hawaii. So the standards reflected regional differences, and that was part of the fabric of the organic community. So in my opinion, there's an inherent tension in having one standard that is supposed to be applicable globally when the foundation of the organic, what we now think of as organic certification, was really a movement and really decentralized. So part of the struggle I think we see with a unified standard, and I remember like it was yesterday in the very first new term in 2000 ACA training, accredited certifier agent training in Atlanta, Georgia. And I remember, he wouldn't mind me saying his name, Phil LaRocca at CCUF did everything. This was the first time face-to-face for a lot of these operators with the that iteration of the NOP at that time. First face-to-face meeting, first official training, because prior to 2000, there were no ACAs. There were just certifiers. I remember Phil doing everything but taking off his boot and whacking it on the podium, complaining that CCUF couldn't control the standard anymore. And I remember Keith Jones, at the time, looking me dead in the eye with a southern drawl, and he meant it. And he said, "You all don't get it. There's a new sheriff in town, and you asked for it." Now
We needed it.
well, we needed it. We did ask for it because, and here's other things, if you weren't around a long time, you didn't recognize, but certifiers didn't get along with each other. Like scathing, yelling, fist fight.
Faxes.
Drunken or otherwise.
Faxes.
Like hardcore, lots of really litigious faxes it passed by. So that was part of the demand, came from industry, processors mostly, who wanted a consistent supply chain, back to consistency, where certifiers would recognize each other and the legitimacy of standards, and the only way to get that done was to have a federalized process. And I would argue it's been a huge positive in getting that consistency, but it still there's still tension there. I think the derivatives of that tension are still around. Phil has kept his boots on lately and is generally playing pretty nice. But there is that tension inherently that I think is part of the fabric of the relationship between certifiers and an operator, because there's recognition. The reason the regulation is not terribly prescriptive is to make room for an operator to know their business well. Like the farmer is always going to be the expert on their farm. The certifier is always going to be the expert on certification. And there's a huge tension there that we asked for as a community. Maybe some people didn't know what they were asking for at the time, but we have a very solid process that's well into its middling years, I would say. Certainly, I think it's post-adolescence now. And a lot of room to go, but my next question will be, as kind of thinking bigger now, what do we need from a grower's perspective, packer, co-manufacturer, brand perspective, and from a certifier? What do we most need to get along better, really, at a high level, but to solve the most important problems that you're seeing as an operator and that you're seeing as a certifier? Amanda?
I don't know if I have an easy answer for this. I think knowledge and experience is part of it. I think, under SOE, inspectors have to have more training, more experience. That's helpful. I know certifiers try to send inspectors who are knowledgeable in what they're inspecting. So hopefully you're not just getting a grain grower or experienced inspector coming out to a leafy green farm. But sometimes you do, and you get to teach them. And again, it's being comfortable talking to them and educating them, because you know your farm. And then I've had my share of not great inspectors, and then I call my certifier and say, these were my difficult pain points today, and how do we navigate that, because I don't feel like have a bad plan and it's going fine, and just this person's not understanding it today. And then I think paperwork is a huge improvement piece. I think we heard in the last panel, Common OSP is coming around. While the standard is the same across the board, the paperwork isn't necessarily. And so some certifiers might have a more sound and sensible approach, and others might make you fill out 50 pages that are just checkboxes. And so navigating that, and is there a way, again, having a relationship of, can we work around some of this paperwork that's not necessary, or what part is or isn't, or what am I already doing? Does my SOP already meet this ask of you, and does that still meet your accreditation requirements? So things like that. And I think just as an industry, we're slowly moving in that direction already. And I think that will be the huge relief for growers, is just, I think, that paperwork part.
Aaron? How do we solve this tension?
Keep going back to communication and common understanding of what operations do and what are needed to be certified. I think it's a hard job for everybody. We know that the growers are doing incredibly hard work every single day. Paperwork and regulatory stuff is kind of number 2, maybe number 3 in their list of important things to do in a day. And so how do we make that simpler for them while still ensuring that compliance and meeting the requirements of the regulation are in place? It's important to have a good OSP. That OSP needs to, you had your example of they didn't know how we make salad mix. On the flip side, that OSP should, from the get-go, have what that process is. We grow it in the ground together, and we harvest it and put it in a box. That would make that really easy if the OSP asked that question. So looking at the OSP, having it in a language that's easier understood, maybe not as long, and still getting the bits of information that we need as a certifier to make really good decisions. So I think the common OSP is going to get us in that place. And also the use of technology for everyone, both to fill out their OSP, to manage their entire organic program. Technology that you can use on your phone to update your OSP so that it is current all the time. Look for things that might work for you and your certifier. There's some really great technological advances happening right now. The Quick Organic is a great example where it walks the operator through, or it can be for a farmer, a handler, a livestock operator. It's like TurboTax. You go through it. It reminds you when you need to do things. And so finding tools that work for you to simplify your certification time that you need to spend.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to go, we've got about 15 minutes. I'm going to go a little off script because I noticed another resource that might be useful in the audience to you all. So Connie, I'm going to come to you in a minute. So Connie Carr spent a lot of her career at Oregon Till managing the certification program there. Now also deals works with Quick, but also works with the Accredited Certifiers Association, which is also a new organization post-NOP that didn't exist prior to the NOP. Just the fact that there is an Accredited Certifier Association that represents, I think, all US certifiers, many of the larger international ones, all but one, I think, of the US. I'm going to ask you, Connie, if because I want ACA represents voices of all certifiers. And this is part of the conversation, is to what extent is the NOP and certification working across the board for everyone. So Connie, you've got like 15 seconds before I get to the microphone. But if you could ask, I want to ask, I feel like Phil Donahue, remember that? Remember that?
You look like him too.
And who do I feel like being put on the spot? So what's the question, John?
What is ACA's perspective on the tension between operator demands and certifier?
Yeah, so I'm really happy to be able to represent the ACA and work with a lot of certifiers throughout the U.S. and internationally. So it kind of gives me a pretty broad perspective of different regions, as well as different tactics that certifiers are taking and approaches that they're doing to solve some of those tensions between the operators. I really see now, especially after the implementation of SOE, certifiers themselves wanting to, they really felt the pressure from their operators, like understanding SOE and these changes. Like I think April was saying last session, the brutality of some of it. And so they really heard that, and they're wanting to simplify it, approach it through sound and sensible or risk-based approaches. The problem that certifiers are having is thinking through and reprogramming their minds about what does risk-based look like. You're basically reprogramming a thought process that has been embedded into people for 25 plus years. And so that's going to take time. And so as the ACA, we're trying to help certifiers understand that to meet the demands and the direction that the NOP is trying to go, as well as then serving that gap and that need to help the operations make certification make sense. Because in so many stories I've heard, people have told me like certification doesn't make sense. Why is somebody asking me to put my field-ready cases into tamper-evident? What is tamper-evident packaging, for goodness gracious? Like, they don't know. So there is, the ACA has also been doing a lot of education as well. So we have a new online academy that anybody can sign up for and pay that goes through a lot of what is required in these regulations. And we're trying to make those very approachable online lessons that anybody, either a certifier, can understand to take a risk-based approach or understand what a farmer might be going through in the field, but also a farmer or an operator can log in and say, what are the certifiers being trained on? What are they doing? And that kind of help seal the gap when you really understand how both are being trained and where they're coming from.
Thanks for letting me. I'll buy you one tonight. Yes, at the free. Yeah. Oh, you know me so well. So that, I'm glad you mentioned that, Connie. Thank you, and very much thank you for diving in there. I should have mentioned that. I'm glad you brought up the academy. That addresses, or that could be a partial solution for many more operators, actually. So yes, it's the Accredited Certifier Association. However, they have an associate membership category that is open to all. And that academy training, I think this is the first year they had that, and they're slowly building really good resources. I think the other feature that a lot of operators don't know about, certifiers generally do, but operators don't, is
Organic Integrity Learning Center.
Yes. I was trying to think of the acronym, OILC, Organic Integrity Learning Center, that the NOP has had in place for a long, long time. And it's a government website, but the content is solid. Right? It's right.
It's not just for certifiers.
It may
it's
not be
for the industry.
I knew Jenny was in the room, and I knew she's patient with me. But it may not be the most easily navigable. However, the content is really, really good. It's quite deep. and broad, and a tremendous good resource. I know you both know about that, but out in the audience, those are two places for readily available, in the case of OILC, free, you got to register, but it's free once you get there. And associate membership, I think, for ACA is quite reasonable. The content in both is very, very good. So, again, I know you both know that, but I think we're at the very early stages of the development of this sort of resource building that could only be done once we recognize what the need is. And in our case, it took a decade or so of this industry before we started knowing enough about what we didn't know in order to build those things. Now they're just starting to get refined, hitting our stride a little bit better. Want to make room for any questions from the audience first about navigating that relationship with Certifier, if you have them. Just raise them up there and all righty. Now I'm really Phil Donahue.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Greg Schreiner, and I'm with Quick Organics, but I actually was a organic farmer for 12 years with a company called Silver Reef Organic Farms. And it's quite interesting. I love farming, right? I love organic farming. And we heard earlier today there was a 1 acre farmer, there's big acre farmers. I was a 2,000 acre farmer. And I felt really good that we were a good farmer, and I felt really proud that we did the paperwork really well. But there was some tension when we heard our inspector was coming out to inspect. And that tension made me think about today that kind of relationship between the certifier and the inspector. And I'm thinking, well, maybe the certifier should have some type of a welcoming dinner or some type of live Zoom call where they get to meet their inspectors. Because there's something about that inspector when they come out, they're almost like a police officer when you get pulled over. Have you ever been pulled over and they've got this stern? And the whole day is kind of like that, where they're stern. And I don't know if we get an understanding of what their purpose is and why they're there and how much it's very serious stuff. Mm-hmm. So maybe some type of thing around that relationship with the inspector and the farmer. I think it could be more relationship building and more positive. If you're doing a good job, it should be a fun experience. So, my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's most certifiers use contracted inspectors, so they are not staff of a certifier, and they may work for, and likely do work for, multiple certifiers, trying to squeeze in as many audits as they can in their available year. I really appreciate what you said about inspectors showing up and not really knowing who's coming, and it kind of got a little light bulb moment there that, if you're a grower and your inspector reaches out to you, ask for a 10-minute Zoom call, a pre-inspection hello. That way at least you know the face, you know how they speak, you can body language and attitude and things like that. You could sense that. So maybe taking the initiative on your side as the grower, asking for a quick call before a video call before your inspection to make sure you're aligned and you understand each other. Again, going back to that communication and building relationships that we keep hitting on.
Yeah, I think inspector management is a challenging and fun part of my job. And I think, feedback is huge. I am very vocal to my certifiers after an inspection. If someone was fair and reasonable, if they were more risk-based, did we spend 8 hours looking at papers and you spent 5 minutes on my floor, so you really didn't do your due diligence? Sure, it made an easy day-ish or not. And then, it's hard to get out of the mindset that this isn't a police officer. And for me, that took time. And multiple inspectors to get through it, and just like they're here to do a job, and learning that no matter what this inspector says, they could say your whole operation is garbage, everything you do is wrong. I mean, I argue a lot with my inspectors of, you should put up a fence. I don't have to put up a fence. Thanks for your interpretation. It doesn't work for me, but great. And so now I say, cool, write it up. And then the certification body will review your opinion. Thank you very much. Because that's not what I've agreed on in my OSP that's approved. And so it's okay to say that sometimes. And then, you know, same, like we have coffee and it's not a bribe. You know, are we making it welcome for them? And just, we spend 10 minutes saying, hello, what is it that you do? Or where are you from? To get just to lighten the mood for everyone, and everyone in my room, because they're all on edge of like, oh my gosh, they're here to like find us doing something bad. And I tell my teams the same thing, like, hey, we don't do anything wrong. And if they find that we made a mistake, then we made a mistake and we need to fix it. So there's nothing, like we're not intentionally doing anything bad. So like, that should already make you feel good. But it's the same, if you get pulled over by a police officer, you know, you check the speed limit, you're like, I'm not speeding, what's going on? And you have a panic attack, like that's just natural. But I think recognizing that they're human, and I think the good inspectors that are out there are the ones that have been around for a long time. So they have more of a risk-based approach where they know what things to look for or not. And so those newer inspectors, I kind of like them sometimes because if they're open to it, you know, I can teach them in some ways without pushing them. But again, of like, what do you know or what don't you know? And then, you know, I'm always asking, have you been to this type of an operation before? Great, so you already know what we're in for, or is this a complete brand new, I need to hold your hand type operation? But the same of having that open dialogue with certifier, same for inspector. And then again, bring that feedback, because I've had conversations with certifiers to say, this person needs more training. Like they were completely inappropriate at my facility. We were borderline willing to ask them to leave. It just wasn't okay. And so it's, maybe they came from somewhere yesterday and they had a really fraudulent case. Like you just don't know what they're coming with because they're human, right? But again, sometimes like the certifier doesn't always know that. So providing that feedback of maybe they need some more supervision or they need to do more training in this space.
Nice, very well-rounded answers there. Thank you. I'm noting the time and need to start wrapping up. Actually, I have to wrap up. So I want to thank Aaron and Amanda for their time. I believe, are both of you sticking around for the rest of the deal? Okay. So they'll be around, and I'm going to volunteer them to answer questions if you got afterward. But we're going to make room for the next dog and pony show here. But thank you. I want to thank you for the audience for your attention. Thank you for Amanda and Aaron, both of you, particularly Amanda, stepping in for John McKeon, who looks nothing like me. But thanks for stepping in, pinch hitting. Appreciate that. And we'll go from there. Thank you, audience. Can we give them a little thank you?